Good evening, families, and thank you for joining us. We will be starting in a couple of minutes. We just want to give families time to join us. Thank you for joining. We'll be starting in 1 minute. We'll be starting in just a moment. We'll just give families a couple of more minutes to come in. All right, so thank you, families, for joining us this evening. I do want to share that we have language interpretation available. And so before we start the presentation, we'll let our interpreters share in the target language what languages are available for interpretation by pressing the world button at the bottom of your screen. And so if we could start with the Spanish interpreter.
Buenas noches, gracias a todos por reunirse en el día de hoy. Van a haber servicios de interpretación. El idioma español va a estar disponible al lado del globo. Usted solamente tiene que seleccionarlo para escuchar esta reunión en español.
Thank you. And then if our Amharic interpreter.
እንደምናመሻችሁ ውድ ቤተሰቦች የዛሬውን ዌቢናር በተለያየ ቋንቋዎች እንዲተረጎሙ አዘጋጅተናል። የአማርኛ ቋንቋውም ከዚህ አንድ ነው። ስለዚህ በስክሪናችሁ ግሎብ ላይ ያለውን በመጫን አማርኛውን ቋንቋ መምረጥ ትችላላችሁ።
Thank you. And then our Arabic interpreter.
مرحبا بكم في هذه الندوة. نشكر حضوركم لهذا اليوم معنا. ونود إبلاغكم بأن هناك تتوفر الترجمة الفورية للغة العربية. يرجى الضغط على الكرة الأرضية الموجودة في أسفل الشاشة واختيار اللغة المطلوبة. شكرا.
Thank you. And then our Dari interpreter.
دوستان شما بخیر. جلسه امشب که شما میبینید به لسان‌های مختلف ترجمه میشه. اگر شما خواهش داشته باشین که جلسه امشب به لسان دری بشنوین، علامه کره زمین در پایینی قسمت پایینی کامپیوتر خود کلیک کنین و لسان دلخواه خود انتخاب کنین تا پرزنتیشن امشب تعقیب کرده بتونین. تشکر. Done.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and start the interpretation and then also share my screen. And while I'm sharing my screen, I also want to introduce you to two additional colleagues that are joining me this evening. So I am Pierrette Finney. I'm Dr. Pierrette Finney. I'm the Chief Academic Officer for the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Leadership. And then I'm also joined by Rainey Pascal, who's our Acting Executive Director of School Leadership, and then also Carmen Sanders, who is our Executive Director of Instructional Support. And so while we are presenting the presentation this evening, as we go through the entire presentation, you will see that this will be a collaborative effort among multiple schools and multiple departments within Alexandria City Public Schools. And so the invited attendees for tonight included Jefferson Houston families, our Jefferson Houston pre-K through 8 families, our Patrick Henry K through 8 families, George Washington and Francis C. Hammond middle school families, and then also Alexandria City High School Minnie Howard campus families. And as I go through the presentation, you'll have a better understanding of why each stakeholder has been invited to this meeting. So for the background, for our essential question, what is the background, purpose, timeline, and scope of work for the pre-K through 8 analysis? And I'll take you through answering this question this evening. So to give you the big picture before we start, the big picture behind this analysis is in a specific analysis of Jefferson Houston pre-K through 8 and Patrick Henry K through 8 schools has been requested to determine if the programmatic model should be maintained And if not, what are the human, programmatic, and operational and fiscal implications of other models? And then it's important for families to note that final recommendations from this analysis will be shared with the Alexandria School Board for decision-making on next steps. And so as we're going through the presentation, if you have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A. And when we get to the presentation, we'll take time to go through all of the Q&A questions. And I'll also provide you an update on how you can continuously communicate with us for other questions. So to give you an overall picture of the timeline, starting with number 1, communication regarding this project or this analysis will be ongoing with families. And so it's extremely important. I'm going to give you all of the dates up front because the dates do occur, a couple of the dates occur over the summer. And we want to make sure that families have an opportunity to continuously engage with us and make sure that families are informed about what's going on. From April to May, it will be what we call information gathering. And so I will explain each one of these as we go throughout the presentation. In June, we will have pros and cons documentation. July will be the alternative analysis. In September, one of our first school board meetings of the 24-25 school year, there'll be a report to the school board regarding the analysis, but there'll also be a similar report to the redistricting committee. And so if families are not aware, we're also concurrently conducting a redistricting analysis that will be reported to the school board in at a future time. But the recommendations will come in August of 2024. And then the school board will make a decision based on the recommendations in the fall of 2024. The decision-making is at their discretion. And so from 2025 to 2026 or beyond, based on their recommendation, that's when the recommendations would be implemented. So, as I shared before, communication is going to be very important throughout this entire analysis. We want to make sure that there's continuous and transparent communication regarding what's going on for every step of the way. And so because I know we are heading into summer, I wanted to give you the dates up front. And so we will have monthly meetings until August. And so the purpose of the monthly meetings will be an opportunity to just allow me to share status updates on where we are with the project. And of course, like this presentation and all others, if you are unavailable to attend on that date, it will be recorded and posted to our website. And so our upcoming dates that I want you to save the date for would be May 28th, June 18th, July 30th, and then August 27th. And then the very final recommendation to be determined based on the school board meeting date in September. And then other ways that we will communicate with families will be through a website update. So there'll be a pre-K through analysis tab on the ACPS website coming soon. There'll also be updates to our school board. We've already conducted staff meetings with all staff at the 2 comprehensive middle schools and also both Jefferson Houston and Patrick Henry. So staff are aware of this analysis. We're having community meetings. This is one of many that we will have. There will also be surveys and other means that we will use to share and solicit feedback. So I know there's a lot of writing on this slide, but I want to make sure that I purposefully share with you all of the data that we're gathering to analyze Jefferson Houston and Patrick Henry. And what you see in parentheses are the departments from central office that are responsible for providing the data. So of course, one data point will be our ACPS 2025 Equity for All strategic plan. The Department of Teaching, Learning, and Leadership, so that's what TLL stands for, Teaching, Learning, and Leadership, will look at the current instructional programs at Patrick Henry and Jefferson Houston. Our Department of Accountability will begin pulling standardized testing data, and there'll be a comparative analysis between Patrick Henry and Jefferson Houston in comparison to George Washington and Francis C. Hammond middle schools. Our HR, which is Human Resources Department, will look at staff recruitment and retention at the schools. They will look at operating costs, which our budget department finance department will take care of. Our facilities department will start to share facilities floor plans and information. And so the important part about sharing that information or making sure we have that information available is to look at space and capacity in each school. Our Department of Accountability will also look at student demographics at each school. And then a combined effort between facilities, technology services, and student services will look at student enrollment and retention over the past 5 years. There'll be relevant survey data from staff, students, and families at our pre-K through 8 and K through 8 schools, so Jefferson, Houston, and Patrick Henry, along with George Washington Middle School and Francis C. Hammond Middle Schools. And so there'll be an opportunity for families to participate in our focus groups. Those dates will be coming up in May that I'll be sharing with you. The Accountability Department will share previous studies. So this is not the first time that a pre-K through 8 analysis has been conducted. There was one conducted previously where there was an analysis conducted. And so they'll look at that previous data. They'll also look at the FY24 proposed combined funds budget. The Department of Teaching, Learning, and Leadership will do a complete analysis of the curricular programs to include IB, which is International Baccalaureate, which only exists at Jefferson Houston at this time. They'll look at specialized instruction, English language learners, talented and gifted, which we call advanced academic services, and then AVID, which is advancement via individual determination. And so they'll look at all of those programs combined from the 4 schools. There'll also be a review of the master schedule to assess if staff are maximized in comparison to student needs. And then there'll also be a review of the current middle school educational programming and its impact on the pre-K through 8 analysis. And so phase 2 of the information gathering, which will occur in May, will include surveys, community meetings, and focus groups. And so the first set of focus group data, community, and surveys that will take place with current, future, and past and/or potential Jefferson, Houston, and Patrick Henry families. And this would include parents, families, and guardians, along with students. And we'll make sure we share those dates when we begin to have these focus groups. There'll also be focus groups with current Jefferson, Houston, and Patrick Henry staff to include the school leadership team, administrators, department chairs, PLC leaders, instructional coaches, elementary grade level teachers, middle school grade level teachers, and of course the school administration to include principals at both schools, assistant principals, and deans. And then there'll also be a comparative analysis of the current middle school staff at both George Washington and Francis C. Hammond, along with Jefferson, Houston, and Patrick Henry to include school leadership, middle school grade level teachers, and then the current high school staff. So we currently know at the Minnie Howard campus, our 9th graders matriculate, our rising 8th graders or 9th graders matriculate to the Minnie Howard campus. And so there will be a focus group with students who attended Patrick Henry and Jefferson Houston in May, who are currently at the Minnie Howard campus to get an assessment of their experiences when they were at the 2 schools. There will also be focus groups with the school leadership of the high school, along with 9th grade administrators and teachers. And then there'll also be focus groups and surveys with central office staff to include the superintendent and then the superintendent's leadership team, which includes all chiefs and executive directors by department. Now, once all of this data is analyzed, our consultants will develop what's called a pros and cons document. And so information from the first 2 phases, which is our information gathering phase, will be used to complete a comprehensive document that details the benefits and challenges of the ACPS pre-K through 8 model or K through 8 model. So in addition to the benefits and challenges, the consultants will also make a comparative analysis with our existing middle schools, which would include Francis C. Hammond and George Washington Middle School. And some of the data points would include size, enrollment, and instructional programming, pretty much the data points that I shared a couple of slides below. And so the document will reflect the quantitative and qualitative information obtained in the information gathering phase. And so when we begin to have our meeting in May and June and July, I'll share updates on the pros and cons documentation. And there'll also be updates and feedback that will be shared with the school community. Now, this is really important. This is what's called the alternative analysis. The alternative analysis will take place from June through July. And so there will end up being a total of 7 scenarios. I'm going to explain the first 5. So based on the pros and cons documentation, the consultant will conduct an alternative analysis where a minimum of 5 options are provided to analyze the human, programmatic, operational, and fiscal impacts. Now, these are the 5 scenarios. The first scenario, excuse me, Jefferson Houston remains a pre-K through 8 school, and Patrick Henry remains a K through 8 school, and the consultants offer guidance for improvement. The second scenario that will be analyzed is Jefferson Houston and Patrick Henry return to being K through 5 schools, and middle school students attend the 2 comprehensive middle schools, meaning middle school students would attend either Jefferson Houston or Francis C. Hammond. The third scenario would be Jefferson Houston and Patrick Henry return to K-5 schools, and then a new middle school is proposed. The fourth scenario is Jefferson Houston and Patrick Henry become comprehensive middle schools, and elementary students are dispersed to appropriate feeder schools. And then the fifth scenario would be one of the K-8 schools, either Jefferson Houston or Patrick Henry, would become a middle school, and then the other would return to a K through 5 school. Now, in addition to that, those 5 scenarios, the consultant must also identify 2 additional scenarios that have not been identified that come to light during the evaluation process. And so all impacts of the 7 scenarios must include and identify cost and also impact. And so the impact would be related to the amount of staff impacted, the amount of families impacted, operating costs, capital costs, time, and implementation costs will be detailed in the analysis. And of course, when we have our monthly meetings, we'll provide updates and feedback on each step. Now, the recommendations will be complete by August 2024. And so all recommendations to the ACPS school board will consider, and all recommendations to the ACPS school board should consider how to implement any recommended change. And the recommended change should also include the human impact, operating costs, capital costs, the timeline, and there could also be consideration and recommendation of appropriate phased implementation, which is typically called grandfathering. And so the updates and feedback will be shared with the school community. It's important to note that the final recommendations, so although recommendations are put forth, they are not final until the school board approves them. And so the final recommendation will be shared with our Alexandria City Public Schools School Board, and they have the final decision. And so there was a link that was shared, and the link has been updated. If you have questions after this meeting, you can add them to the FAQ document that we're developing that will be posted to the website. And so I'll also share that in your Parent Square, the link to the FAQ tomorrow, as well as a reminder. And then also, please remember and place on your calendars the save the date meetings that we have for our upcoming community meetings, which would include May 28th, June 18th, July 30th, and August 27th. And so what I will do right now is stop share, and we can take any or answer any questions that may come into the chat. Mr. Pascal, could you read the questions for me, please?
Absolutely. So the first question, if I heard correctly, the recommendation will be implemented prior to the zoning study how will this K-8 study inform the need to rezone? Is there capacity at Hammond or other middle schools to accommodate Patrick Henry current middle schooler? So several questions there, Dr. Finney.
Right. Thank you. So those are all great questions. So the recommendation is occurring right now to inform the school board decision. And so it's also going to inform decision-making for the redistricting. And so the school board would make a decision regarding if this recommendation would be implemented prior to redistricting or along with redistricting. But they wanted to have the data to make an informed decision as we are also doing redistricting. And so whether or not there's capacity at Hammond or the other middle schools would be determined through the analysis. I definitely can't answer that right now, as there's been nothing determined. No analysis has been completed at this point. And so the analysis will let us know if there is capacity at the middle schools. Okay. Mr. Pascal, what are the next questions?
Sure. There was a request to repeat those dates for the future meetings in the chat, and I think we can revisit that at the end. So the next question, how will this study account for impacts or anomalies to the K-8 model due to the pandemic?
So that's a great question as well. And so it's important to note that the consultants are not just looking at data for one isolated year. They're looking at data over a period of time. So the previous study for the pre-K through 8 analysis occurred, I want to say in 2017 or 2018. And so they will start their data collection from the last analysis up until now. And so, of course, that would also include impacts in data from the pandemic as well.
Okay, and a concern about the IB program. So I'm concerned about my Jefferson Houston student being able to continue her international baccalaureate education. The IB program is important to families that have started their children on that track. If students are taken out of the IB program, all the work and benefits of them being IB students could be lost. This would happen in most of the scenarios that were offered. What can be done about that? Even if Jefferson Houston stays a pre-K through 8 school, what are the options for them to continue as an IB school?
Wonderful questions. Thank you, Michelle. And so as it stands right now, we do not have an IB program at the high school level. And we have not had one in many, many years. I believe the last time we had IB at the high school was back in 2010 to 2013, but IB is no longer at the high school. So students do not have an opportunity to earn an IB diploma. Now, it's important to note that in the analysis, they will also look at the IB program. So the scenarios don't necessarily mean that IB could not be offered, but it also means it could be offered. So they're going to do an analysis of our entire instructional program to look at the benefits of all educational programming that occurs at the school for them to make decisions. And so this is this chat that you're sharing and this concern that you're sharing will definitely be shared with our consultants so that they are taking into account all data points that we receive. So this is a data point when we have community meetings. We'll be working very closely with our school leaders and school administrators to ensure that we have family voice through surveys or be invited to focus groups. Okay. Thank you.
Next question. To what degree is equity being incorporated into the analysis plan, and how is it being integrated into the analysis process?
Thank you. So I hope I am understanding your definition of equity, but and if I'm not, please put a clarifying question in the chat. So thank you, Kirsten. So regarding equity, when it comes to the analysis of data, they are looking at all student demographic data across all, demographics for all 4 schools plus the Mini Howard campus. We are working very strategically with the school leaders at every school so that when we do have the focus groups with students, that it represents a cross-section of every population that exists in the school. And that would be the same when we meet with teachers and then also families. And so we do recognize that our school leaders know their families best. So we will be depending on them and relying on them to ensure that all voices are heard, diverse voices are heard. And so that would be the ways that equity is being included in the integration process. And so we want to make sure that we're doing strategic outreach to sometimes the voices that we don't hear, along with the voices that we do hear.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
As we pause right now for some more questions to come in, I did note, Ms. Sanders, if you wanted to respond to any of those as well. Looked like you were prepared to respond to some of them. I didn't want to cut you off, but no pressure to unmute. Dr. Finney has answered them. So we still have time for some more questions. We'll be patient, have some wait time here, and wait for some more questions to come in.
Thank you, Mr. Pascal. And so Carmen Sanders is our Executive Director of School Leadership, of Instructional Support. And so she leads the instructional program for the division. And so she will be very involved in looking at all instructional programming across the division and providing data to support an analysis to include IB, AVID, honors, advanced academic services, special education, English language learners, which we also have 2 other executive directors for specialized instruction and English language learners who are going to be involved in this analysis as well.
Sure, and another question has surfaced. What is the timeline for the redistricting process? What school year will these changes likely occur?
Thank you. And so those are great questions. The redistricting process is occurring right now. And so the meetings are, if you go on the ACPS website, you can see the dates that the meetings are held. The redistricting process or the implementation date, I cannot foreshadow, as that is a decision that's made by the school board. However, the redistricting process will take place, or the analysis of the redistricting process will take place for the remainder of this year and into next year. And so any decision making with our school board would be after next school year. But as far as the date of implementation, that would be a decision of the school board. We don't have that exact date at this time. All right. Are there any other questions? Well, as you said, Mr. Pascal, we'll give everybody some wait time. And while we're doing that, there was a question that asked for the dates in the chat, or the dates to be, there was a question asking for the next time that we're going to hold these community meetings. And so I'm going to put those dates so that all families are able to see them. We'll also send out the dates through Parent Square and continuously communicate through our ACPS website. So this video will be posted to our ACPS website in the coming week, along with the presentation. And so you also have the dates in advance for now through August. And so it was very important that we gave you the dates in advance, because we do know it's summertime and we want to make sure that families are well informed of the dates in advance. And so will the future meetings be on the same Zoom link? Possibly. We are working with our technology services department, but we will also make sure we post the Zoom link well in advance, and the next meetings, hopefully the next series of meetings, can remain on the same Zoom link, but we'll work with technology services. All right. All right. And so if there are no other questions, tomorrow in Parent Square, you'll see an update from me that sends you the link to the Q&A, because we want to continuously be able to communicate with families, not only through our Q&A document that's being developed, but also through community meetings. And so you'll be able to continuously communicate with us as you have questions, and we'll post the Q&A along with the answers to the ACPS website. But of course, let me just make sure we're not missing any questions. I think we have all of them. We do thank you, families, for joining us this evening. And again, we look forward to continuously updating you on our pre-K through 8 analysis that will be taking place between now and August of 2024. All right. Have a great evening, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.